Station 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come.
All right, 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Our last interview, if you picked up on it, the gentleman who was talking about his life and how he overcame a lot of hurdles had one hurdle that actually connects to this next conversation we're going to have. He said that he had diabetic retinopathy, and he said he was born with diabetes. So I think we're going to learn about diabetes right now. But one of the scary things about that disease is that it has so many other things that seem to be caused by it. And in just a little while, we will have in the studio Casandra Ricci. She's coming in here right now. She is going to talk about diabetes. Suzanne Santangelo is here, and she probably is glad that I'm not talking to her.
Casandra made it.
Yes, I know you are. So we're going to talk about diabetes, and we're going to talk about things that you maybe can do to protect yourself from whatever secondary things happen as a result of diabetes. Let me say good morning to Casandra Ricci. Good morning, Casandra.
Good morning.
Am I saying your name right?
Casandra Ricci. Yeah.
Ricci.
You were close.
See, I thought it was like the actress. Isn't there an actress with the same spelling?
There is. I get that a lot.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? Well, thank you for coming in here. Now, as you were walking in, you probably didn't hear what I was saying, is that our last guest had, among other things that he had to overcome, he had some eye conditions that were caused by diabetic retinopathy, right? But his was diabetes type 1. He was born with it, he said?
Right.
Okay, so first, let me just say good morning. Good morning. Thank you for coming.
Good morning to you, too.
And you're part of the Ocala Health System, right? We want to make sure we mention that.
Yes, I work at Family Care Specialists in Bellevue, Florida, right on 441.
Oh, in Bellevue. Okay, okay.
Yep.
Now, we're focusing on diabetes. Is that what you do exclusively, is work with diabetics?
We're actually a family practice, so
Okay.
we do a little bit of everything.
Oh, okay.
But diabetes is huge, not only in our community, but all over. So it is a big part of our practice.
Why? Why is it huge? What happened? I don't remember it being huge a few years ago.
It's progressively getting more and more common for diabetes. One, I think, because we're looking for it earlier, whereas we didn't know as much about it or weren't as aggressive in the past. But two, they're seeing environmental links, not just familial links. So the obesity epidemic is definitely contributing to the increase in the diabetic population as well.
So is there anything that we used to think about diabetes that is not true?
That it was harmless.
Oh, really? We thought it was harmless.
Well, a lot of people thought, oh, it's just my sugar. It's not that big of a deal. They didn't realize that multiple organ systems in the body are being affected by diabetes. It's not just the sugar level. It's your heart. It's your kidneys. It's your brain. It's your eyes, like the gentleman you had on earlier. Multiple systems, your veins, believe it or not. People are having nervous system issues, neuropathy, which is very common in diabetics, which, if you don't know, is a very painful condition, numbness, tingling in the extremities, even complete loss of sensation, which then leads to pressure sores, ulcers.
Wow.
It's just kind of a snowball effect.
So are we at the point now where we can reverse it? To
a point. It's definitely controllable. It doesn't have to take over your entire life and alter every aspect of it, which is encouraging.
By the way, I like your Christmas tree earrings.
Thank you. Got to be seasonal. Bring a little fun to the office. I have matching socks. I'll show you those. But yeah, it's definitely, in the early stages, depending on the cause, it can be reversible. If it's solely due to diet and lifestyle, we can modify those things and correct it. Type 1 diabetes, like the gentleman you had on earlier, isn't reversible, unfortunately. That's a lifelong condition.
So what is the difference between 1 and 2?
Between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes is the pancreas is completely lacking the ability to produce the insulin that's needed to control the sugars in our body. Type 2, the pancreas does make some insulin, but it's either not enough to effectively control our sugar levels, or the body isn't adequately using it or effectively using it.
And why? Why
They're not 100% sure.
Okay.
There's multiple things that lead to type 2 diabetes, including, familial aspects as well as environmental aspects, but they're not 100% sure what.
Is diabetes, can we suspect it in ourselves? Are there things that we might be experiencing that kind of give us a red flag?
Yes. Type 1 diabetes is a lot more obvious. You're going to see more dramatic symptoms. Type 2 diabetes is a little sneakier. A lot of people are walking around with diabetes and don't even know it. A lot of times we discover it. They went into the hospital and they happen to draw blood work. Or you follow up with your primary care provider for your annual labs and they notice, your random glucose is elevating each time. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more testing, like a hemoglobin A1C.
Wow.
Symptoms that you might have would be kind of fatigue. You're not feeling as energetic as normal. You can have some increase in thirst. You just, no matter how many bottles of water you drink, you're not quite satisfied. Increase in urination, kind of a
So it's coming in and going out.
It is.
It's coming.
A cycle.
We hear the term borderline diabetes. Is that an accurate term or is that a myth? Can you be a borderline?
In our practice, we don't typically use borderline. Either you are diabetic or you aren't. It's kind of like being borderline pregnant. It's one or the other.
Exactly.
Borderline was more so a way to ease people into the idea of becoming diabetic. Now we just say you are at risk of diabetes or you're starting the early stages of diabetes, which is a little bit more accurate. Because I think the more you know, this is a serious thing, we need to start making some changes, the more apt you are to do it. Borderline, people tend to think, well, it's not that big a deal.
It's
I'm
borderline.
just borderline.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
It's like standing on the edge of a cliff.
Right.
I'm not falling off
I'm
yet.
just borderline falling off that cliff.
Does exercise have an effect on type 2 diabetes?
It does. It allows the body to more effectively utilize that insulin because you're decreasing your abdominal fat, for one. The higher instance or percentage of body fat that you have, the more likely you are to have insulin resistance. There's molecules within belly fat specifically, more so than fat in other areas of the body, which cause insulin resistance. So the bigger the tummy, the more resistance you have, which then will increase your glucose levels.
Wow, wonder why that is.
They're not 100% sure. It's the free fatty acids in belly fat specifically. They're still doing research on it. Diabetes is one of those topics that I think we're going to learn more and more about every year.
Santa Claus might be diabetic.
I'm pretty sure he is with all those cookies and whole milk. Yeah. He's probably got a little vial of insulin in the sleigh, I'm sure.
Do other vices contribute to diabetes, like smoking and drinking and things like that?
Not necessarily diabetes per se, but overall well-being and health, yes, which then could contribute. So possibly indirectly, yeah.
Okay.
And now when people are eating candy and things during the holidays, is that still okay for them to do that?
Everything is fine in moderation as far as diet. Even diabetics can have sweets now and then. We don't completely eliminate their intake of sugar. However, it's very important the quantity and the quality of the experience. Sugary drinks, especially, the sugar in beverages, for some reason has been linked to the development of type 2 diabetes. Sugary foods, cookies and candies, not so much. But still, the increase in calorie production in your body, you're increasing your intake and decreasing your output. You're going to have higher body fat, which then leads to diabetes. So it's all kind of...
That's a key to it right there.
Comes back to the same thing.
So losing weight...
maintaining an active lifestyle, eating a well-balanced meal. You can cheat now and then. There's nothing wrong with that. Or, you got to have a little fun in life. But again, moderation is definitely, and choosing smarter foods, lowering your glycemic index. You can still have a candy bar, but one may be a little bit better for you than another.
Do you have people coming to you and they're borderline, or maybe they're over the borderline, I don't know, and you kind of sit down with them and they listen and they really, really follow everything you say, and a year or so later you've seen them totally turn it around? Have you seen that? Do you have those success stories?
I have, yes. You get a few that kind of blow it off a little bit, and They do a little changes, but not much. But even a little bit of a change can make a significant improvement in your overall health and your glucose levels. I have seen people take it straight to heart. They have family members that were diabetic, and that's just detrimental to them because they've seen the negative outcomes of diabetes when they're poorly controlled, like going blind or losing a limb.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, that's a scary thing.
And it's preventable, which is what's important to know, is you don't have to go down those roads. Not everybody is going to be a critical diabetic.
What happens that causes a person to lose a limb? What physically changes that needs the limb removed?
Well, as I said, the diabetic neuropathy earlier, I mentioned it, where you lose sensation, you may get a small wound. Normally would heal properly in a healthy individual like you or I. Diabetes, the high glucose level, causes decreased ability to heal those wounds, for one, and two, you're not feeling it. We would say, my foot is really sore, I should go have somebody look at it. Whereas in this population, they don't know. They can't feel it at all.
It's always the feet? Could it be the hands? Or
it could be. It's more distal extremities, so your feet and legs typically be affected first.
Wow.
Hands you can look at, especially in our older or obese population, they can't get a good look at the underside of their foot very easily. Right. They have hip problems, knee problems. It's physically challenging for them to do that. Or they don't have anybody at home that regularly checks their feet, which is where your primary care comes in. More so important, we do regular diabetic foot checks with your annual visits or your semi-annual visits. Your podiatrist will check your feet regularly. If you're diabetic, most insurance companies will pay for you to go to the podiatrist. Have your toenails managed so they're not digging into the skin and getting uncontrolled. Little things can really make some big impacts.
Is the term sugar-free misleading?
It is. Sugar-free does not mean calorie-free. And again, as we discussed, the increase in calories is still a really important part in controlling your diabetes.
Oh, wow. All right, so now somebody who's listening who's not obese in any way, are they out? I mean, they're fine automatically?
Their risk may be slightly less than somebody who is obese, but they're still not risk-free. Obesity is a big part of developing type 2 diabetes, but it's not the only portion. As we mentioned, lifestyle and environmental factors are also key components into the development of the disease. I'm sure you've seen people that you have envied. They're eating hamburgers. They're eating 6 pieces at a time, and they're still nice and slender.
You wouldn't believe how many chicken wings this lady, just like you, perfect shape, just eating them. I said, Robin, how come I can't do that?
That's right. Exactly. She's
just because physiologically she is able to metabolize those calories doesn't mean her little pancreas isn't working overtime to control that glucose level.
Is it genetic? Diabetes?
Portion of it can be, absolutely. They have seen some links in families with type 2 and type 1 diabetes having offspring with a higher risk. Some are theorizing it may be because families tend to eat alike. If your mother and father always made very high-calorie, high-sugary meals, you're more likely to enjoy that type of food and those type of meals, so you're more likely to make them for yourself and your family. So it's a trend that can easily be broken if we put a little effort into it.
So every now and then somebody will talk about being lethargic and getting tired like early in the day when you really shouldn't be getting tired. Is that also is there a connection between diabetes and I guess being sluggish in the afternoon?
Can be. High sugar levels are going to just make you exhausted. Think about having a huge piece of cake, you get a little energy, and then all of a sudden, bam,
boom,
you're ready for a nap.
Yeah.
Think about that high sugar level daily.
Is diabetes cultural? Are there some cultures that diabetes doesn't occur?
I'm not aware of any that it does not occur. However, it is higher in populations. Hispanic populations and African American populations do have a higher instance.
Really?
Some tend to think it may be, again, cultural as far as the food intake that they're bringing in. And in a lot of areas, you tend to need that high calorie count. You're looking for the most bang for your buck, for lack of a better expression. Cheaper foods with higher calories because you may not have the access to regular meals, so you need to get as much as you can when you can.
Do you want to take phone calls?
Sure.
Do you want me to invite the listeners if you'd like to call? The number is open. It's 622-9622. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. 622-9622 is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, just to give the sponsor a plug there. And we do have a call, so let's go to the phone. Good morning. You're on the air with Casandra Ricci.
Yes, good morning.
Oh, you'll need the
Cassandra.
headphones. I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning. Does salt intake, large amount of salt intake, have anything to do with diabetes? Does it play any kind of a role?
Well, it is going to increase your likeliness of developing hypertension and fluid retention, not necessarily the sugar control or management itself, no.
Okay, because they always say that, a large intake of salt will hold water, and will that affect a person that has diabetes to be holding a lot of water?
It can, because it's going to increase your risk of cellulitis, which is an infection within the tissue. So the more fluid you have in your lower extremities, it puts you at higher risk anyway. And then with the decreased ability to heal wounds, you really need to be careful.
Yes, if both of your parents on both sides, everyone has diabetes in the families, and you have an offspring, at what young age should you be kind of looking to see if that's being passed on to the child?
Typically, we don't start doing blood work until 18 years of age in our clinic. Pediatricians may start looking at a younger age. Typically around 10, they'll start doing blood work annually if you have a strong history of diabetes. Really, the most important thing I can stress is just watch your child. You know how they're doing, what they're doing. If you are noticing a huge weight loss in your child and they're, eating like a typical kid, you definitely want to bring them into their primary care provider and have them evaluated. Worst comes to worst, they say you have a nice, healthy child and you recheck in a year.
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, and the phone line is open if you'd like to ask another question. Casandra Ricci is here. She's an advanced registered nurse practitioner with family care specialists in Bellevue, and you do obviously more than diabetes, but that's what we're focusing on today.
Right.
So if somebody wanted to call in, I guess they could ask any general question. So you see all ages, children and adults?
We do. We see 2 years and up.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is diabetes, can that be prevalent in athletes? Because sometimes athletes take a lot of painkillers, they take steroids. Does that have any potential risk for them to develop diabetes?
Steroid use in general can raise your glucose level in the body, so yes, it could elevate your random sugar level. However, usually they're burning so many calories to counteract it. I haven't seen any increase in prevalation.
So help me understand the raised glucose level. If I eat a donut, do I automatically raise my glucose level? I do. Okay.
That's your body's natural response.
What about pasta?
Any carbohydrate.
Okay.
Carbohydrate converts to sugars once it gets metabolized.
So does anything not do that? I guess vegetables wouldn't do that, would they?
Actually, they do.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, especially your starchy vegetables. The good ones,
Potatoes?
corn, potatoes, the ones we all indulge in.
Right.
They're very high in sugar.
How about the sugars in fruit? Natural fruit. The God-given fruit.
It's definitely a better option than refined sugars, but still has sugar value. Still going to raise your body's glucose. So you still need to, again, eat it in moderation. There's plenty of searches online, and we do a lot of handouts and education in our office with different glucose values for different types of fruits. So if you are going to indulge, you can pick one versus the other, a little bit more healthy. And at least in fruit, you have that high fiber intake. So it's doing your body a little bit of extra good versus eating a candy bar where you're not really getting any nutritional value.
Oh, wow. So have you always been this way? Have you always been very, very conscious of healthy eating and healthy lifestyles?
I have several family members who are diabetic. So it's been in my family forever. And I have several nurses in my family as well, so we've all kind of chit-chatted about it around the dinner table. It's normal conversation growing up.
Did you see the story the other night? They were calling this woman the half-ton killer. Did you see that story? Okay, I'll tell you real quickly. She weighed 1,000 pounds. A child was killed in her home, and she said she did it, even though, the long story short, she didn't do it. She was protecting her sister who had done it. I don't remember what the story was, but so she went to court. They had to have a special a bed brought into the courtroom because she couldn't walk, she couldn't get out of bed. Well, now she looks fabulous, and I'm not trying to bring that story into your show except for this reason. She now looks wonderful. She's 200 pounds, I think, down from 1,000, but it's not like flabby skin hanging all over the place. She looks fine. And they say she did it with a high protein diet. That to me sounds like meat. Is that, would that be a way to, is that what they do?
High protein diets are kind of the new fad right now. You know, they're pushing more protein, less carbs. To be honest, a well-rounded meal, you're going to lose
So it's
the weight.
really all you need to do?
Really, yeah. Your calories should be used smartly. That's the big thing. Do a little research. You know, talk to your primary care provider. Not everybody needs a personal trainer to lose weight and feel good. We don't all need to fit into a bikini either. You know, you want to make sure you're able to do the things that you enjoy. You know.
It seems that there is a little bit of a contradiction, because I've known some people who had diabetes and they would carry candy in their purse or their bag or something like that, and then as soon as something starts happening, they need to eat some candy. Why does all of a sudden whatever it is that their body's having just drops?
We get that a lot in the office, and somewhere along the line it was misconstrued that all diabetics have to have this candy in their pocket. They don't necessarily. If their glucose is being well controlled, you're following up with your primary care regularly, we're keeping a good eye on you. Some medications that you take for diabetes can cause hypoglycemia or significantly low blood sugars. This can cause symptoms, shakiness, fatigue, headaches, blurred vision. It's miserable. You take some candy, it elevates your sugar, the symptoms go away.
And if a person's on Coumadin or high blood pressure medication, does that affect the diabetes also?
Possibly indirectly, but not so much.
Wow.
Yeah.
You talked about wounds before and non-healing wounds.
Yes.
I know at the wound center we have a big population of diabetic patients, but a non-healing wound in and of itself is an indication of diabetes.
No, not alone. It is definitely a warning factor. Most individuals have had wounds before and they've healed well. If all of a sudden you've noticed your wound is not healing, you're doing everything appropriately, you should be following with a healthcare provider of some sort for care anyway. Usually they have done some sort of lab work to get an indicator, hey, maybe your sugars aren't adequately being controlled anymore. But if you haven't been to a healthcare provider, it's definitely a red flag to go ahead and get established with somebody and just get some basic lab work.
Wow.
Thanks.
The way the information is on the internet, sometimes people like to self-diagnose and not go to a physician. Is that a good idea?
No. The internet tends to give us more information than we actually need, and not always accurate information. It's not a bad place to start if you want to go ahead and do a Google search on your symptoms, but then follow up with your primary care provider and see if the information you've gotten is actually accurate or helpful. Sometimes it tends to hinder. You can Google search one word and get 8 different diagnoses. You may not have picked the right one for you. And the treatment could actually make your condition worse. And that's not the goal of healthcare. We want to definitely improve overall health and well-being.
So give us the cheat sheet version of what we need to be looking out for to maybe give us a red flag that we need to go see a doctor about diabetes to be checked for it.
Okay. If you are eating fairly well-balanced meals and you're still gaining weight or losing weight rapidly without any significant effort, that's a red flag. Increased urinary frequency, you're going to the bathroom multiple times a day and your intake of liquids doesn't seem to match your output, that's another red flag. If you're getting urinary tract infections frequently, the high glucose level in your body can cause infections in the bladder. That's another red flag. Insatiable thirst, like we mentioned earlier, is definitely something to look at. I mean, everyone should have yearly blood work with their provider anyway, just to keep on top of things. If we find things in earlier stages, we can reverse it or at least control it and prevent it from getting to those critical stages.
And if you do get to the point where you need insulin, is it always a needle?
Yeah.
It's always a needle.
It's always a needle.
Oh, man, that's enough to get everybody. Really?
They do have insulin pumps that can be inserted, so you don't actually have to. It's a lifestyle. You know, if you want to be free to go ahead and live your life, not constantly injecting yourself, it's an option for some patients. But most patients, the needle, to be quite honest, is smaller than the human hair.
Really?
The needle, yeah. So if you can picture that, it's really not as bad as it sounds. To be honest, the finger stick is much worse than the actual insulin injection. We have a lot of insulins that are only once a day, which makes it a lot easier for people to fathom the use. But usually oral medications for new onset diabetes works really well.
Oh, really? So there is some oral medication.
There's multiple oral medications.
Oh, okay. So it's not always the needle.
Insulin always goes in the needle, but not
insulin
all
is.
diabetes medications are insulin.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. And have you ever known anybody who was prescribed insulin, who started the lifestyle and no longer needed the
Yes,
insulin?
we have multiple patients who have been able to come off of insulin
that's
once
great.
they decide to make that real commitment to themselves and their new lifestyle.
And that's the key right there. A person has to be willing to do it. You have to go and
right.
do that exercise or eat the right foods.
You're
and
exactly
that's
right.
All
Yeah.
within your own self.
Yeah, it's the same as trying to quit smoking. You know, if you're not ready to make that commitment to change,
Yeah.
may not be overly successful.
Good information. And if you were listening right now and you weren't sure, you might want to go down to Family Care Specialists in Bellevue and meet up with Casandra.
That would be lovely. We are always taking new patients.
And do you want to give out any information as far as getting a hold of you? Do you have a phone number or
I do.
website even?
We do have a family care website,
Yeah, the family care website is available on Ocala Health System.
Okay.
and our local number is 352-245-1111.
Okay. All right. I think we have that already. If you didn't catch that, if you're driving and you couldn't write it down, call us. We'll be glad to repeat it for you. Thank you for coming in, Casandra.
Thank you.
That was fun. Suzanne Santangelo, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, well, it's always a pleasure.
We'll take a little break and we will be right back.
Today in Florida Ag News from the Southeast AgNet, well, soil is responsible for nearly all life on the planet, but rarely gets the respect it deserves. But today, December 5th, this living and life-giving resource is finally getting its day, thanks to World Soil Day. And USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is adding the word health to the celebration